Oh, we're live.
Okay,
Here we go.
we're live.
Hello.
We're good to go. Good evening, everyone. Sorry about us. I say us. Sorry about me being late. Russell was here in plenty of time.
It was, as was our guest. And then just before we split the screen, we've got a lovely photograph there that I'm sure our guest will tell us a little bit more about with those beautiful still houses there.
Guesses in the comments, please. You might
quickly
know.
guesses before we. Yeah, absolutely. Where is that?
All the regulars have left because we're late. They're like, yeah, sorry. Today I've been the whiskey ambassador course to a group of guys in the shop, so that's the reason I'm running a wee bit late. So apologies to everyone who's arrived on time, champing at the bit to hear Russell and I do a wee introduction as normal. It's obviously not the fun part, but the fun part is seeing who's going to say hello first.
No, well, numbers are picking up, so let's see who's going to say hello first. With a guess of, maybe that's why nobody's saying hello yet. Like, where the hell is that?
Yeah. The one I say hello, that is.
Yes.
Yeah. That's anyway. What's in your glass, Russell?
Well, given that I don't have anything from the house of tonight's guest, I've just gone for a Jericho. From the Lost Distillery, Jericho being the old distillery, Benihee, that was out by Colby once upon a time.
Have you ever been up to see the? Because
I had a look. I couldn't find anything. I think there's maybe cattle sheds or something that are kind of regular stuff.
But you can kind of make out the builds that are there. Yeah, definitely. It's quite hard to get, but the farmer who owns apparently he's not he doesn't take kindly to whiskey geeks kind of rummaging through his farm looking for old distillery buildings. And I was driving up in the tour bus, so it was quick spotted, and then turn around and get out and go up with the old discreet private car next time, I think.
So that's maybe one of those farms where the teacher takes a school up and the teacher says, what does the cow say? And the kids say moo. What does the horse say? Neigh. What does the sheep say? Bah. What does the farmer say? Get off my fucking tractor.
That's an old one, but a good one. Let's get a guest on.
Yes, absolutely.
Before any more jokes come on.
Before we lose any
language after. Just okay, so moment of truth as always.
There we go.
Seamless.
There we go.
Good evening, sir.
Matt, how are you?
Good evening. I am very well, thanks. How are you guys?
Fantastic, yeah.
So, was there anyone managed to guess the distillery yet then?
Good.
Nobody's even said hello yet.
I didn't guess it at all. I haven't even had a hello.
We've usually got, there's a couple of people that are fastest finger on the button that usually, here we go. Oh, Keith, well done.
There we go. Keith.
Well done, Keith.
From left field, Keith comes up on the inside, takes the prize for the first time. I don't know where Phil and David are. They must be on holiday or something. Keith, while you're watching, do you know what the distillery is behind us?
Mm-hmm.
No,
we should maybe give a clue and introduce Matt, and then maybe people will start to maybe try and work it out from there.
If you're eagle-eyed, you might get the first few letters just on the right of the picture there. So you'll get your first three letters.
Yes.
Use everything at your disposal, right? That's what they always say. So I say eagle-eyed, you'll get the first few letters in the corner there. But
he's going to get his glasses on. I think nobody else is playing.
We were saying it's one of those distilleries you drive past, but it's rare to get a viewing round, right? It's only a couple of times in the year at the Spirit of Speyside Whiskey Festival we open up. So again, a bit of a clue there as to the location where we're coming from. So Spirit of Speyside.
We had a few, so there's been a few friends kind of beginning of January jump on, hire a bus, jump on, and kind of drive around kind of distilleries and just have a bottle from that distillery, sit in the car park, have a chat about it, have a dram, and drive off again. Obviously, a designated driver. And Craigellachie, that one, we stopped off and stopped in the car park a bit. We got out. We sometimes just have a wander around, so we're just starting to go around the back of the distillery. Somebody came out and kind of, whoa, boys, you kind of just walk around without a high vis. But when we're in, my friend's kind of work, so he had high vis vests in it. So he's like, oh, nobody. So off he went and got his high vis. And the worker was like, technically, yes, okay. But still,
you don't try, you don't get it. That's it. Fair
exactly.
play to you.
It was a brave attempt, but
there we go.
Is it Craigellachie, mate? That's an incredible guess there, Keith. I've absolutely no idea where you figured that one out from. Well done, sir.
Yeah. I would be hopeless at keeping secrets.
So Matt, maybe Matt, you can maybe tell us a little bit about who you are, who you work for, and
yeah, of course. So again, I didn't want to give it away, but anyone who might have noticed a few bottles above my head, there's a bit of a giveaway behind there as well, I've noticed. So it wasn't too good at keeping that one a secret. But I work for, it's John Dewars Sons, again, is our head company. And I have the wonderful title of Global Brand Ambassador. But I think I was saying to you at the last festival, Russell, I've been a bit of a charlatan, I think, calling myself a Global Brand Ambassador up until a few weeks ago, because I was in the role for about 2 years and yet to make a global flight. So I only, first time, I think a rarity for a Global Brand Ambassador, almost 2 years in the role without making a move, as I started in March 2020 in that role. So yeah, I finally think I can get to call myself a Global Brand Ambassador after a trip to the States. Finally made it.
Popped your cherry.
But in Craigellachie again is although we've got a lovely portfolio of whiskies, within the group, Craigellachie definitely has a place close to my heart, as it's my hometown as well. It's where I'm from. So.
Right. Yeah. So you're mentioning about the Space Out Festival. So it's tickets went live yesterday, I think. Is that right? So they are all good to go.
That's it. And we'll be busy at it again. I think we're one of the busiest companies at it. We love it. Myself and I know you guys know Gary Ross as well. I'm a good pal and partner in Whiskey Crime as well. So we love getting you round. As I say, there's only that 1 or 2 days a year we actually open up Craigellachie and Aultmore, and we love to jam pack those tours into it there as well as some other great events. So yes, it's again very biased home territory, right? But I think it's one of the best festivals, if not the best around.
Absolutely fabulous. I mean, Mike and I came up to. I missed out on Aultmore. So anybody listening, if you're even thinking about going to some of the events in the festival, don't think. Just book your tickets. Work it out later on what you're doing. Because I made that mistake about pre-COVID. I seriously wanted to go to Aultmore. I'd bought a bottle along the way, and I kind of fell in love with it. And I thought, oh gosh, £10 a ticket to go around the distillery, fantastic. I'll go and see if some of my mates want to go. It took me a couple of days to get contacts. Of course, by that time the tickets were sold out. I thought, shite. So the trick is buy the tickets and then see if there's anybody who wants to come with you. I think that's so yeah, get on there. So tours of Aultmore, tours of Craigellachie, absolutely fantastic opportunity.
I think there might just be 1 or 2 left. I know I haven't looked at the sales today, but I think we pretty much sold out yesterday, bar 1 or 2 tickets. So yeah, you might be one of the lucky few if there is a ticket or 2 left, but worth the check.
One says James. So yeah, but yeah, absolutely. It's one of these things. Just don't think about it. If you see these tickets on sale, buy them. Think about it after. You can always sell them if you can't go. You can always give them to somebody else. Yeah.
I mean, the downside is you have to put mine and Gary's patter at the distillery, but even that, that aside, I think it's still well worth the £10. We usually get you a wee dram of the new make spirit, so you can see what's been coming out of the stills, and then get to taste some of the older expressions as well. So you can't go wrong, right, for a tenner.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
Jeremy watching as well. So Jeremy was at the tour the last time with Russell and I. Not with us, but we met up. Speak to Jeremy quite a lot on social media. As part of a lot of whiskey group chat. So it was good to meet in person finally as well. And I drove him back to Keith so he could get his bus.
I remember that as a good. That's all about the festival, right? Everyone just helps each other out around.
Yeah, exactly.
No one's stuck for a lift, which is great.
If you remember right, I was late for that as well. I think I came whizzing in the corner 5 minutes after the two started.
You made it perfect timing. I'd say that was it.
I was padding like hell. It was like trying to kind of fill this kind of gap. Yeah, so yeah, I'm sure he's on his way. And by the way, look at that over there. And
I'm not wasting the ticket. He's getting his money worth. Excellent. So a little bit, let's say, kind of Craigellachie was spoken about, a little bit about Aultmore. Obviously, there's so much we want to talk about today. Other brands within the range.
So Aberfeldy for us is the one that we can't not talk about. I think it's the only one that we have with an official visitor centre as well. And again, I know I'm very, very biased, but it has won Visitor Centre of the Year with some pretty big awards in the past. And it was actually the one I previously, before, I've been working with John Dewars Sons for coming on 4 years now. Before that, I was with Shivas Brothers for almost 9 years with Shivas Brothers, starting off as a tour guide and various things as well. And it was the one that really made me want to join John Dewars Sons. Was a random visit into Aberfeldy, and the rest was history from there. That was me, just an absolute fan. Anyone who's been, you'll know the sort of archive room that they have there. I mean, it's sort of whiskey history is one of the things that really fascinates me with industry. And the archive room that they have there for you to get to look around. My poor girlfriend at the time, I dragged around a few distilleries, seen mum and dad up north, and on the way back down to Edinburgh, I said, "Is there any chance we'll quick stop?" And I promised 20 minutes tops at Aberfeldy. 4 hours later, I was still there. It's that sort of tour where you're just absorbed in all this fantastic history and information. So let's say I know I'm very biased now, but I can say even before I worked for the company, it was just this mecca for kind of whiskey history and information for me.
Brilliant.
Fantastic.
I love that, and I've fallen into that, but that experience for you. I'm only going to spend 10 minutes here, 15 minutes, half an hour, just stop off to pick up something, and then you see somebody there, and it might not even be a distillery staff, but a customer of the shop or something, and you're in the visitor centre, and you're like yapping away. Tony's sitting outside, like this, but.
That's the great thing about the industry, right? I know me and Russell were speaking just before you came on in the back there, and for me, there's just no other industry like it, right? The passion that people have and the time that they're willing to give. I think there's so few industries that have that. We're very lucky.
Yeah, and the openness as well, the willingness to share, I think, is unique. It doesn't seem to be, you can't. I'm not going to tell you our secret recipe kind of thing. They're so open about what goes into making whiskies and stuff.
That's it. If we know, we'll tell you. It's that sort of thing. And being from Craigellachie, I've been in the pub where you've got guys from various different distilleries sitting around the one table. And it's, if there's problems at one distillery and there's a more experienced guy from the other distillery, he's still helping that guy out, right? And I think that's it. When you get into the production side of things and the making side of it all, everyone's just there to help each other out, regardless. There's not that competition in the same way, right? When it gets to sales and marketing, different story, right? But at the production level, we're all pals.
You haven't any fights at festivals, have you, with other stallholders now?
Well, I was saying about how I ended up in Aberfeldy, and it actually started in a boxing ring in Miami, of all places. It's where my first introduction to the world of John Dewars Sons was, and it was when I was with Shivas Brothers out there in the States. I think it was week 2 in the job, and all I remember was I hadn't got my wardrobe ready for Miami. I only had like a thick Harris tweed, was like the only smart kind of jacket I had, which is normally fine because they have their air conditioning on so low. You actually want a jacket when you go inside in most of these places. But it was in a distributor's warehouse where they hadn't got any working aircon. And I remember everyone else had a smart jacket on. So I was determined to keep this really, smart Harris tweed jacket on, sweating away. And we were going head to head kind of brand histories. It was me with Chivas Regal at the time versus Dewars, which of course is, one that is growing definitely here in the UK, but is massive. It's the number one in the States. And went, head to head with this guy, Gabe Gardarella, who's still one of our fantastic ambassadors out there. And, I just remember hearing the story about John Dewars Sons and being blown away. It's like, how do I not know this? Do you know what I mean? And it really encouraged me. That it was him that said, you need to stop into Aberfeldy. on the next visit. So a fight of sorts there, you know, but it's a lot to answer for in that fight. As I say, I wouldn't be where I am now if it hadn't been for that boxing ring. So there we go.
Superb. Yeah. I suppose moving from obviously there may be very different internally, but from the face of it, looking in, big blended kind of whiskey, working with our own individual distilleries. Was that one of the attractions for you to move? Was it a similar kind of setup, or was it just that whole romance of Aberfeldy that kind of pulled you in?
A bit of both. Do you know what I mean? I'd say it was a company, again, I'd kind of been on the fringes for. Again, Craigellachie being my hometown, you know, it was home pride, the thought to get to represent my village, you know. Then just the brand homes is kind of where I started as the sort of brand homes ambassador, so looking after kind of specialist visits, and that was really what swung it for me. It was the opportunity to get to go back up home quite a lot. You know, my mum and dad and brother still live in the village, so any opportunity to get to go back up. My brother worked in the Highlander for a while. He was behind the bar in there. So, you know, it was amazing when you brought guests from around the world, you know, into this little village, and they're like, they see someone who looks, me and my brother are quite similar looking. So they're like, oh, he looks just like you behind the bar. And you say, oh, that's my brother, you know, and then quite often dad would pop past as well. They're like, are you guys just living, you know, it's basically the village is just made up of Cordiners, you know, it's that sort of thing. So it's, they all absolutely loved it. It's also, you know, I think that was it for me. Craigellachie is, I live in Edinburgh now, but Craigellachie will always be home. You know, in that respect. So between that and Aberfeldy, you know, that's kind of what pulled me in. But as I say, five distilleries in there. Aultmore, you know, as you're saying, Russell and Mike as well, you guys got to go round. I think it's one of the best kept secrets in Speyside, right? It's this little hidden gem of a distillery. And I think what they're producing there is, you know, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal whiskey. And alongside that, we also have Royal Brackler, which is actually what's in my glass tonight. I was trying to decide which one to pour for the Blether, and I thought, you know what, that's a good one I've not had in a wee while. So a great wee Royal Brackler 12 on there. And then last but not least, I think the forgotten child within our lovely group is Macduff Distillery. But of course, we don't bottle as Macduff, you know, at the moment. It's under the Deveron as well. There's historic reasons for that. But I think it's one that gets forgotten. But if you ever get a chance to go around, and again, we don't open it at the moment, as well. We may be able to pull some strings and get you guys round, but the distillery manager there, Jamie, you've never met a more passionate distillery manager in all your life. As I say, if he has his way, it'll be the biggest brand in the world for Scotch whisky.
I'll have that phone number before you go off tonight, because I go past that distillery on a regular basis. I just stay literally 12 minutes away. If I'm in a hurry, 10 from Macduff. And I mean, it's just on the banks of the Deveron. You've got the Duff House Royal golf course across the water. It is just beautiful.
It is an idyllic setting. It's one of those, I think, it is a function over form distillery design, I'll say there. You know, it was a child of, you know, the 1960s, I think, in kind of distillery architecture, which, you know, doesn't have that beautiful Victorian romance about it, you know, like if you see Aberfeldy, for example. But that was a really exciting time, you know, in Scotch whisky. I think we forget to look back at and talk about, you know, with the sort of industrial revolution that had happened in distilling, you know, off the back of the Second World War, and the easing of grain rationings, you know, and your kind of modern shell and tube condensers coming in, you know, the doing away with building, you know, maltings on site, gravity fed systems, a lot of kind of energy efficiency coming in. So for me, you know, it might not look the most pretty building on the outside, but what's going on the inside is super interesting, you know, as well. I think a lot of what we see now within the Scotch whisky industry as a standard, a lot of that was, you know, pioneered in distilleries like Macduff at the time, you know, and it's, again, one of the coolest things I think you'll see there are horizontal shell and tube condensers, which I don't know how many you've seen. Again, we've got probably the right people on the call here. I reckon there's only two others I can think of, which must be Craigellachie. Is it Dalmore? I want to say Dalmore maybe has one as well, right? But I can't think of any others. Again, we've got the hive mind probably in the background here. So if anybody's been to another distillery that has a horizontal condenser, do let us know, because I'd love to find out if there are more. But to my knowledge, just the three. But yeah, super interesting. Yeah, Craigellachie. There we go, Jeremy. I knew you'd know that one.
But it's a fantastic spirit, Macduff. I mean, it's one of these ones. Macduff, there's lots of indie bottlers will bottle Macduff, and it's one of the ones I'll always look for, because it's not always the one that everybody scrambles for, so you can usually get a hand. And I'm thinking, you know, I I keep on trying not to give away my secret favourites because you don't want people to start thinking. But yeah, Macduff's definitely one of those that I'll always go for in an indie lineup. Fantastic spirit.
And I think it's bang for your
It's
buck.
very good sell
It
as
just
well.
doesn't go wrong, right?
No.
It's
Yeah,
I mean,
the core
for me,
Deveron
it's-
whiskies are sorry,
what's that,
the
sorry?
12 and the 18. So the 12 and the 18, fantastic core
Yeah,
expressions. They
Deveron.
do very well at the shop as well.
The 18, I think, in amongst our malts team has always been a favourite. My boss, who's head of malts, he can literally drink whatever he wants, right? If he's out and about, he can drink whatever he wants at a work function. I know he's going for the Deveron 18. That's his absolute go-to right there as well. So I think when someone who literally could have anything, chooses that, you're onto something good there, right? But from when they built the distillery, I think that was the kind of mantra, I guess, of that kind of group. It was sort of 4 Glasgow businessmen that built it, headed up by Brodie Hepburn. And their mantra pretty much was trying to make all these efficiencies, again, in part to bring the costs down. But again, that was kind of going to be passed on to the consumer. It was making great whiskey at good volume, but at a really good price. That was kind of what it was always thought about. Today it's one of the kind of core components for William Lawson's. Again, a big blend in certain parts of the world, but again, one we just don't see too much of in this country. But yeah, I think to your point there, Russell, I've had loads of great indie bottlings of Macduff over the years, and did a great tasting with some guys out in the States over lockdown who had a ridiculous lineup of old Macduff whiskies as well. I think some were close to 40 years old and stuff, and it was just absolutely cracking. I got to go around last week. I was doing a tour around all our distilleries and the warehousing, and I actually noticed there was a cask of 1960 Macduff, so the year it was built, hidden away in one of the warehouses. So I don't know what we're doing with that yet, but I will definitely be putting my name in the hat for that one to get a wee taste, because I'd love to see what that was like when it was laid down. And again, there's been a few changes, expansions over the years, but it'd be great to see what that would be like.
Got to try and work that out. I mean, we were having a wee chat before we went on live about, somebody was saying the other day that something happened such a long time ago. It was 2013. I'm like, that wasn't that long ago. And it's like 9 years, but 1960. So that's like 62 years old.
That sounds right. Yeah, because we had in lockdown we were celebrating. I remember our 60th anniversary, so that would be right. That's about 2 years on, or coming up for 2 years on now, right? So, it's mad. Where does time go, eh?
Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Yeah. Wait till you get to my age, man.
There's not many whiskies older than Russell, that's for sure.
Well, that's one that is, but just it's got me.
I'm just at that stage now where it's buying a whiskey that's as old as me is getting a bit more challenging and a bit more expensive. So it's I'll enjoy it while it lasts. I'm still a young pup, really.
What kind of whiskey? This is a question we ask everyone who comes on. If out with your own brands, so that's a few whiskies you're not allowed to pick. You walk into a whiskey bar. What do you look for?
I'm a Speyside boy through and through. I've definitely been kind of blinkered to that a lot of my life, and I think that's just how my palate grew growing up. That again, I had lots of access to great Speyside whiskies, with many family friends and guys from school and all this, working at all different distilleries. So for me, Speyside's still where it's at. Getting into my peaty stuff a little bit more now, but I think anything Speyside. I mean, again, credit where credit's due. Starting with Chivas Brothers, I think someone like Glenlivet for me, like a Glenlivet 18 is still a hard dram to beat, right? In the scheme of things, but you're hard to find a bad Speyside, in my opinion.
I'm saying this is my drama of the night. I couldn't find, like Russell, I couldn't find a Dewars brand. It's a shame. I was looking. We had
because I've normally got a bottle of Aultmore and I've normally got a bottle of Macduff, and I've neither just now. Yeah. I mean, I raked into the back of the cupboard. I'm thinking, let's take a coffee.
I remember
we'll need to sort that.
I've got a Brackler from Alistair Walker kicking about somewhere, but I couldn't find it. It's a fantastic ram.
I was going to go with a Dalmunich just for the sake of it, but I decided against it.
I mean, you say Brackler
in a bottle cover. So
I've got a love-hate relationship with Brackler. I really want to fall in love with Brackler, but the problem with Brackler for me is that it is the one and only bottle of whiskey that I've dropped and broken in the shop.
I have a love-hate relationship with Brackler as well. I'd say I love it so much, and I hate how quickly it runs out in the bottle. That's my hate of it as well.
Well, it runs out even quicker if you drop it on the floor.
That's true. But that's what's in my glass tonight. As I say, we've just had a bit of a refresh on the Royal Brackler range. You guys might have seen in the last sort of year. Officially, it was launched, would have been the end of 2020 in Taiwan. So that was an experience again, doing a global launch of a whiskey in your slippers, basically on a call with the malt master. Visually brought in, big screens to a dinner in Taiwan at, it must have been like 9 a.m. or something over here, still with the slippers on. So that was an experience, I'll say, in itself. But official global launch then, and then shortly after, we kind of brought it out to the UK. But if you were a fan of the old Royal Brackler, you'll know it was, again, 40%, everything kind of finished in Oloroso sherry cask. But with the new range, like the new 12 I've got now, again, we kind of looked at what had been working well with Craigellachie and with Aultmore, and we kind of thought Royal Brackler would benefit from that again, and especially speaking to Stephanie, our malt master, bringing the ABV up a little bit. Again, natural colour, non-chill filtered was kind of what we're going for. So across the new range, so the 12 here now, kind of classic, Royal Brackler, I think, being finished in that Oloroso sherry cask as well. But the new range really is an exploration, I think, in kind of sherry cask finishing. If you've seen the 18-year-old, that is finished in the Palo Cortado, which I think is like such an interesting dram as well. It's kind of that funky, musty, unusual kind of, it's almost like a citrus zing at the end there. And then the 21-year-old now, the new 21 it's kind of a sherry trinity, if you like. There's a percentage finished in Oloroso, percentage in Palo Cortado, and a percentage in PX. I mean, that is just like the biggest sort of dessert whiskey you're going to get. It's such a treat, just coats the palate. But 18-year-old, as I say, for me, if you get a chance, I'd say that's the really exciting, interesting one for the whiskey nerds.
Is it quite unusual for?
So which one?
Am I in? Yeah.
Which one was the trilogy one? Did you see it?
The 21.
21 there, yeah, for us is that's the one where it's that kind of Trinity finish in there. But yeah, well, I definitely need to sort you boys out with a dram there if you've not had a taste of that yet.
Fantastic, yeah.
Up and passing.
The Palo Cortado sounds amazing. It's such an amazing sherry. I mean, are you a sherry boy as well?
I do like a bit of sherry as well. It's I wouldn't say it's something I go to that often. It's definitely since, I think, as our range grows and I need to learn more about sherry to have the knowledge to actually talk a little bit about it around what we're finishing casks. I'll say my love of sherry has grown alongside kind of having to learn about it with kind of what we're moving into. So I'm definitely not there yet. I would not profess myself to be a sherry expert by any standards, but it is definitely starting to kind of learn a little bit more about those finishing casks. I mean, I know it's sherry is a whole other, but it comes to talking about what we actually do with sherry casks and whiskey, right? Remember you guys had a great conversation. Who was it now? Was it Chris Coates? I think you had on before.
Yes.
I remember watching that one, and you were kind of diving into sort of misconceptions in sherry and stuff, right? It's pretty interesting there. So yeah, still learning a lot around sherry and the industry and kind of what we're doing within our own with whiskey, and again, kind of looking at the finishing cast that we're using there as well. So it's a fascinating world, but one I've still definitely a lot of reading up to do.
Yeah.
But what about you guys? You quite like a big sherried whiskey, right?
Like a big sherry whiskey, like a big sherry as well.
I like a big sherry. I'm happy with the bourbon, to be quite honest, or ex-bourbon, I should say. And I'm probably growing more. I think I probably get much more from an ex-bourbon. I think there was a release of the Karen Moore's Royal Mail Whiskies had it today, and there was 2 Glenburgies. There was a Ben Nevis, and now there was something else, and they were all sherry apart from the ex-bourbon Glenburgie. And I thought, you know what, that's the one I would actually want to drink the most, because that would tell me much more about the distillery style. It's a distillery I don't know anything about. So that's why I always go for the ex-bourbon, because that really tells me what I'm getting,
I think
from the distillery.
You've hit the nail on the head for me there. And, when you're saying about, do I like, sherry and the sherry whiskey? For me, it always comes back to distillery character, right? And creating that balance. And I think, a sherry bomb is great now and again, but a sherry bomb where you can still actually get some distillery character coming through. And I will say the Royal Brackler 21 is a bit of a sherry bomb, right? Using something like PX in there. But it works for me, I think, because Royal Brackler has this lovely clean acidity, kind of in the new make. It's this really kind of lovely, elegant summer's breeze that whatever, even if you're bringing these, big cask finishings, it still kind of cuts through. And I think that is, Stephanie now, she's one of the most modest people you'll ever meet, our malt master and master blender, but she is like right up here now with the best of them, right? Multi-award winning master blender of the year, multiple years in a row now. And I think why she keeps winning and what she's doing so well is that balance, right? How she thinks about finishing and, use of casks. And, for us, sometimes it can just be 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. It's not loads and loads of time in a finishing cask. It's finding that kind of sweet spot and that balance, and allowing distillery character to come through. And I think, I am very biased, but across our entire range, I think that's what you find, whatever it's finished in, is it bourbon, is it sherry? It doesn't matter. If it's got Stephanie's name on it, right? It's that balance is what she brings to the game. And that's what she does time and time again and so well. So I agree with yourself there, Russell. I think it's all about getting that distillery character, that DNA. Otherwise, you could be tasting anything, right? It's really important to bring that in.
I think more from an indie bottling point of view, I think, and I'm not dismissing it because I think these guys do a fantastic job. I think from a distillery point of view, you're right. Somebody like Stephanie knows exactly what she's dealing with, exactly what she's doing. And that's why they earn their money. They're so good, incredibly good at what they do, and getting that consistency and knowing what's there. I mean, it's mind blowing, the skill that a master blender has, just completely mind blowing. But yeah, from an indie bottling point of view, I'd like to try. Apart from anything else, they're much more available because people tend not to snap up the clear bottles. They go for all the dark ones, so they're easier to get a hold of. But I think they're often better from an indie point of view.
Yeah. For sure.
It's quite interesting as well if you get something like a Brackler or say something like a Glendronach or a Glenfarclas. Everyone knows this sherry cask from the distillery, but you slide them over a bourbon cask from Glenfarclas, and people try it. They're like, oh, that's really quite nice, actually. What's that? It's a Glenfarclas. Can't be Glenfarclas. Glenfarclas is sherry. And you're like, well, yeah, but this is what Glenfarclas tastes like without that influence. It's quite interesting to open up new avenues to people in drinking.
It's just a different facet of that distillery character, right?
Yeah, exactly. Until probably Russell got me into Glencairn. I was a sherry and a port fan. I liked the cask finishes, but I really got into bourbon in the last couple of years and really finding out distillery character and how I do think if you want to know what a distillery character tastes like, try it in a bourbon, and you get much more character through it. Absolutely.
I love that we do. So you were saying about our sort of core range there. I think that with Brackler, again, just as you were saying, it normally is, in that sort of sherry finishing, but we do something as well across our entire range, which we call exceptional casks. And that is, again, anything under John Dewars Sons, where Stephanie and the blending team have kind of found just a really special cask, something a little bit different, or they're doing experiments with different kind of finishings. And that, I think you're seeing some really interesting stuff from us there. So I've seen Bracklers, not sort of sherry finished around the world. And it's exactly as you say, it's, what's this? Is this a Brackler? And you can kind of see a bit of that distillery character shining through, but in a different way, right? It's a different facet of that distillery character. So I'm a big fan of doing that as well. When you're used to seeing it in one, look to see how it finishes in the other, right? And it's you see a different side of the character completely.
You don't see so many Bracklers and indie bottlers. I mean, again, for me, my first introduction to an Aultmore and Macduff were both indie bottles. Obviously, Macduff, you can't get Macduff, you've got to go Deveron. And I've had the Foggy Moss, and it's a fantastic dram. I've had many bottles of the Foggy Moss. But and from an indie bottling lineup, I always snap up the Aultmore, which is always in the usually finished straight ex-bourbon as well. And it's just such a fantastic, light, grassy, beautiful, floral meadow. Just a brilliant, beautiful dram. And sometimes, I've had sherry finishes from Duncan Taylor. I think had a heavily sherried finish. Didn't enjoy it nearly quite so much. I think the subtle bit of sherry that you guys put in the 12-year-olds and what have you is fantastic. But for me, a heavy sherry hit into that doesn't quite work quite so well.
Again, it's balance is key, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the key thing. And you were saying, Mike, about characters that I like. For me, if you're thinking classic Speyside, for me it's Aultmore. I think it is that clean, kind of grassy, sort of fresh side, right? And again, it's one of these distilleries, like a lot of our group that you're seeing here, people might be thinking, I've not really seen too much of these yet, right? And I always say we are very old distilleries, but relatively new brands, Again, it was only bought over by Bacardi, from what then was Diageo at the time, back in 1998. So it's, taken a few years for, Bacardi is the head ownership, with under the John Dewars Sons umbrella for our whiskey side of things under them, to kind of build up those stocks, in the way that they would like to kind of have that as a sort of standard offering. So, really, apart from Aberfeldy, which did have, other sort of smaller releases before, most of what you're seeing now really became standard in kind of end of 2014, officially kind of launched beginning of 2015 under what was kind of known as the last great malts, at the time. So it is, a lot of the time it is new brands or the kind of bottlings that we do. And, people relied on the indie bottlings, which you did get over the years. And I think that's where, we had to release these as standard kind of single malts, under the Bacardi ownership, because they saw you had, malt enthusiasts crying out for things like Aultmore, the amount of questions they got, when are you going to release, something like this? But Aultmore, I think, has always had that kind of cult following for that reason. And, it was known, the nickname was a nip of the Bucky Road, which we wrote onto the bottle, as well. And it's because, you go back in history and it was that distillery on the, the 9 Mile Road to Bucky, that's kind of what people knew it as. It was the distillery on the road out to Bucky. And it was, I'll have a nip of the Bucky Road is kind of what locals would ask for like indie bottlings of Aultmore there as well. So it's always kind of had this kind of cult following. People weren't quite sure what it was called, all that kind of side of things, which I think kind of adds to the allure and the kind of mystery of it. I mean, you're saying as well, about the Foggy Moss. I always remember there was a great video of, it was one of the old Martin team coming up from down south up, and they asked one of the stillmen, why is it called the Foggy Moss? And he said, well, if you have a look out that window there, you're going to see a lot of fog and you're going to see a lot of moss. I'll let you work that one. We name things how we see them, right? And it's, again, not too far from the sea. You do kind of get that a little har now and again, and it's that lovely, just mossy, fertile ground. Again, Aultmore, that name comes from the Gaelic for like big burn, loads and loads of water kind of flowing underneath that, the foggy moss. Someone, again, if you look on a map, someone said, how do you spell that? Is it Fogggy or Foggie? And I said, well, it depends which side of the road you're on. So literally, if you look at a map, it's spelled differently on both sides, marking the field. So we can't even make our mind up on how to spell it up there, as well. So keeps us on our toes.
Jeremy's just put a question I was going to kind of ask you as well, or kind of allude to. You're slowly getting into peated whiskey, but like Jeremy, I couldn't think of one that you own that is one. Is that quite unusual for a blended company as big as Dewars not to have a peated whiskey in your portfolio? Two, where do you get peat from? Because I think peat's quite important in any blend. And Jeremy said, is it just bad memory for getting a distillery out there that's owned by you guys?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, we have 5 distilleries there. The only one that you could argue even has a hint of something almost peaty but not quite is Craigellachie, and it's nothing like a big peaty whiskey at all. So we don't have one. And again, the honest answer is I don't think there's one place that we get that peat from. When you think of like a Dewars blend, where there's deals across all companies, and they deal with us as well. Any of the big players, you name them, there's deals there behind the scenes, I'm sure. I don't think there's a specific, one place we're calling out for that, but I think it's a variety of, any big peaty whiskey you can think of. There's probably a bit of it coming into us one way or another there as well. So, but yeah, quite unusual, right? We don't have that peaty distillery, but I think that's, again, the interesting thing about our industry is when you get to the blended whiskey side of things, right? And we're talking about why everyone's so friendly in the production side of things, right? We kind of all rely on each other's distilleries, right? And again, I think Aultmore is one of those ones for us that everybody wants to get. And, historically, that was always kind of the ace up our sleeve, and again, when the DCL had it, they always kind of ranked it as one of those kind of top class whiskies. So
Yeah.
if you get a copy of like Charlie McLean's Whiskey Miscellaneous, it's got this great page at the back, which is like the blending records. I think it's from like 1974 or something, of kind of what the DCL at the time was kind of ranking all the whiskies across Scotland. And they kind of had it as, you know, top class, first class, second class, third class, so on in grain. And there was always just 12 whiskies kind of sitting in that top class ranking, all of which were Speyside, just saying. And, you know, Aultmore always sat on that list. And, you know, right from the word go, I think when Aultmore was built, you know, it started, it would have been 1897, you know, it was kind of up and running. And within a year, it proved so popular. It doubled from, I think it was like 50,000 gallons up to 100,000 gallons. And, you know, I don't think there's been another distillery in history that's kind of doubled in that scale in that short period of time, just down to that success. And, you know, that was blenders getting hold of it and thinking, wow, this is something special. And it was, you know, really seemed to elevate the blend. So Aultmore has always been, whoever's owned it, it's always been that phenomenal whiskey for having in blends, but it became that great kind of trading commodity. So, you know, we've just got 5 distilleries, but a lot of our distilleries are ones that other blenders really want to get hold of as well, you know, for adding something into that blend. So, yeah, no set whiskey, says I say, but loads of deals going on behind the scenes for a bit of everything, really.
Am I right in thinking that Aultmore, when it was it part of the Flora and Fauna at one point? When it was Diageo?
Now you're asking. I think there, again, don't quote me on this one. I think there maybe was a bottle at some point. I know there definitely was for Craigellachie, because I think it was like 14 rolls for Craigellachie. I've seen that one in passing. But I do believe there was an Aultmore as well, but I need to double check on that one.
You need to be the kind of Highlander, because Tattoo's got a fantastic collection of them in there, hasn't he?
Amazing. I mean, yeah, you can tell usually where I go for my dram there. They go, that's the little one, just random drop of water.
I mean, Jesus Christ, how lucky. I mean, that's, you know, to actually be from Craigellachie, have your Dram pub, the Highlander, for your posh night out across the road to the Copper Dog. You know,
two great, you know, whiskey bars in the village. And, you know, it's one of these things, I never thought anything of growing up around whiskey. And I didn't think I was going to end up in the whiskey industry at all. I went off to university to study classical music, thought I was going to be a musician, thought that was the way it was going to go. Yeah. And it's amazing, just you realize you need a job basically as a student in your summer holidays, you know, as a poor student, trying to get some money together, you know, for going back to uni. Tour guides, hands down the best job you can get if you're from Speyside. Decent money, good crack with all your pals from school or home. And usually a good bottle or two to bring back for your mates at uni. So you're everybody's best pal when term starts again. And when I started, again, Glenlivet was where I started. I didn't realize how much I'd picked up just from having, you know, my family kind of friends, you know, again, a few distillery managers or coopers or, you know, various things. And it's all the sort of conversation you've just been kind of listening to, but not really thinking much of. And then someone asks you a question, like, oh, I actually know the answer to that one, you know, things like that. So it was a great place for growing up, as I say, someone who never thought they were going to work in the whiskey industry. And then it was, I'd say, probably that first sort of year as a tour guide at Glenlivet and seeing all these people coming in from around the world to learn about whiskey and visiting your villages, because it was this mecca, you know, for whiskey. And it sort of thought, hold on a minute, we've got something pretty special and pretty unique here, right? And I say, going off to even just, you know, I got as far as Aberdeen, you know, that was as far away as I got for going to uni. And you realize, hold on a minute, everyone's not got a distillery in their village, you know, that is actually quite unusual. So, you know, I think you couldn't have asked for a better upbringing, you know, especially now being into whiskey. And again, every day's a school day. I think in whiskey, there's always something to learn, and having those people back home, you know, or people I know I can phone up who do the jobs, you know, to ask kind of firsthand for information is invaluable.
But Speyside is so special. I mean, I have a converse experience to your one. So being sort of born and brought up there, and then sort of going as far as Aberdeen, thinking, where are all these chimneys and where are all these tanker lorries? And I can just imagine thinking, where's it all gone? The converse, my brother-in-law, who is from Perth and lives in he lives just in Fife now, but just in the edge of Perthshire. Huge whiskey fan, and came up to stay just at the end of last year. And I said, "Come on, we'll have a wee drive down to Speyside." He's like, "Oh, that must be a long way away." Like, no, it's just about an hour. We'll be there in no time. And he didn't say a lot that day, but it was when we got back to the house and we were sitting having a dram, he went, "You know, I had a kind of idea there was a lot of distilleries up there, but I mean, I had absolutely no idea how many. It's like, you just can't look but see a distillery. It's incredible."
That's it.
And I thought was somebody who's heavily into his whiskey just did not get the concept of how heavily populated it is. It's just bumpy. dump whiskey in one area and that's it. It's just like everywhere, and it's fantastic.
I had my boss's boss was in from the States the other day, and it was he's just new into the role and kind of taken in, kind of sort of heading up sort of the whiskey section and others. And I met him up at Royal Brackler Distillery, met him at Inverness Airport, and it's kind of my job to kind of show him the distilleries and drive around for a few days. And sitting in the car, he was like, "There's another distillery. There's another distillery." Do you know what I mean? Again, I think it suddenly dawned home for him. It's like it's amazing how close so many are together.
Yeah.
But that's an amazing thing, I think, and it really shows that even your neighbour, like again, let's take Aultmore and Craigellachie as that example, right? They're 10 miles apart. Two of our distilleries, they couldn't be more different, I think, from each other, in some respects as well. And I think that's the great thing. It's yes, we all have the same equipment-ish. Yes, we all do the kind of same process in roughly the same order-ish again. But the characters and the flavors you can produce. And I think I was saying I like a Speyside style. There is the style, but then within that you've got so many different possibilities as well, right? Then you expand to whiskey in general, right? I think that's what keeps you guys in a job, right? I guess with everyone coming back for trying a different bottle, and keeps me in a job as well with so many different things to talk about. And
you've just hit on something for me there, Matt, and actually something I'm a great one for metaphors and analogies and stuff, and it's just something I've actually just thought of for the first time. But when you're having an evening or you're having a spell of liking Aultmore, it's like watching a particular football team and then thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go and watch this team, so I'm going to go and watch Craigellachie for a while because they're different." And it's almost a bit like that. You kind of go down these little wee phases of, "Oh wait, I fancy a wee bit of that kind of football, so I'm going to go and watch them instead." And it's almost a bit like that you do feel you're not just drinking whiskey. It's not the different name, the different where it is, the way it's built, everything around that kind of the area that the distillery is actually based at brings you in a different kind of place, and you feel you've kind of spent time with that particular whiskey. I mean, you could say distillery area. It's not brand, yes, but it's a bit more than the brand.
Totally, and it's more than just that in the glass, right?
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
As you say, I did a research paper again. Although I didn't, I went back and did business at university, and I did my final dissertation in the Scotch whisky industry and kind of the sort of millennials' perception of whiskey at that time, but looking at whiskey enthusiasts in whiskey societies as well. And I always said, what's your favorite whiskey of the moment? And they would tell me, and then the question would come up, what was the last distillery you visited? And it was usually the one that they just said is their current favorite, right? And I think that's the really interesting thing. It was whatever they just visited, they were like, that's my favorite whiskey now. Right? I think it's amazing the power of place and meeting people and telling the stories, right? And I think it's so special in that way. And again, so many on the doorstep and so many to see. For anybody who's getting into whiskey, there's nothing like going and visiting the place it's made, right, and the people that make it. I see my job as a global master as a glorified tour guide, but quite often I don't have a distillery there, right? Traveling around the world, and it's going to try to bring people to that place without them actually being there. And so much of that is picking up all these great stories I've heard over the years from the people making the whiskey and passing them on, right? Essentially, that's kind of what my job is. And it's, there's just nothing like actually getting you into the place, though, at the end of the day. So with that, as I say, Spirit of Speyside, if you've been enjoying the Craigellachie and Aultmore chat, that is your only opportunity of the year to get into
yes, absolutely.
We haven't
cracked one ticket still there.
Yeah. Well, we haven't cracked that quite yet for Macduff and Royal Brackler, but who knows, one day, hopefully. But let's say Aberfeldy is that one you can get around at any time, and it is well worth a visit.
We've got a busy spell coming up with the shop, as I kind of spoke about. We've got our inaugural academy next week. But I noticed the Craigellachie tickets, and I very nearly just went and bought 2 tickets because I sometimes do these things with and I'll say Mike will definitely come with me, but I'll let it go this time because I know we're going to be really busy for the next little wee while. So I'll just need to wait for the next festival. I was straight on, and they were all available. All the dates were available. I was like, just buy them.
Well, I think our gem of the festival this year, I reckon, is going to be we've managed to get some of the blending team are actually coming up from Glasgow, and I don't think we've quite worked out what it will be yet, but we're doing a charity tasting at the Craig Hotel. Where it will be, they've just said they're going to bring some weird and wonderful stuff, cask samples, and bring them up with them. And you'll be delighted if you're regulars of the festival and you have to put up with mine and Gary's chat for event after event after event. We're not going to be talking for once. We're going to get some of them to do some of the chat. So it'll be a new set of voices on our brands as well. which I'm sure is a great thing as well. But I think that's what I'm really looking forward to, I think, this year as well. But yeah, it's a phenomenal festival. But yeah.
So little wee question, just a wee side issue, and again, the Blethers aren't always just about whiskey, because Ed wanted to know what instrument was
I started off in the cello, which was originally my first study there, but I fell in love with the drums, like drum kit, percussion, anything loud at the back of the orchestra, anything you can make a lot of noise with. That's kind of where I ended up. By the time I finished, that was my main study. So drum kit for me, put me behind a set of drums and I'm a happy man.
An actual drum kit, not just a kind of big, heavy kind of...
Oh, yeah. A bit of everything, but yeah, drum kit. Like I used to play in a Cayley band as well, so kind of got into Scottish folk music as well, which was, again, my great way to pay myself through uni at weekends was playing a lot of Cayleys in and around Aberdeen. So if you know the Blue Lamp in Aberdeen, that great pub, again, with the now late Sandy Brown as well. He gave us our kind of first gigs in there. So, I love a bit of folk music and, as I say, a bit of jazz as well. But any excuse to sit behind a drum kit, and as I say, I'm a happy man. I still have to try and bring the two together. That's what I'm working on at the moment. And I've seen some cracking drum kits over the years where guys have used like old casks, to build a bass drum and stuff. So if I can do that, that'll be the absolute dream, right? Getting a whiskey cask drum kit would be phenomenal. I think Balvenie, I want to say they might have done it a few years ago. Was it for like Green Day's drummer or something? Trey Cool.
Oh, really?
I think they managed to do one. And then I know, is it Felipe as well, managed to get, I think, one as well for like a sort of session thing. I can't remember who that was. I think one of the Isla distilleries kind of helped him build something. So yeah, that'd be great. That's the dream, right?
We'll need to get excited. Part of our
the old distillery set there.
Sorry, Mike.
The old Macallan distillery. There was a guitar that was made out of casks, but that had vials of whiskey in the neck as well. But
oh wow!
I know it's not drums, but be good to get a band together purely using instruments made out of casks.
well, I don't know if you knew our old global brand ambassador for Dewars, Fraser Campbell. If you came across him before, he's a massive guitarist, and he actually managed to get a guitar made out of it was old, like transporting like crates. Again, it was an old Dewars crate. He managed to get one made of, so it still said like Dewars on the side. So he always joked because it's a guitar and drums. And of course, we have the famous white label blend. We should start a band called the White Label Stripes. So like the white stripes, kind of getting the two. So if I could get one, a whiskey drum kit, and he's got a whiskey guitar, that'd be the dream. So we never managed to make it happen, getting a practice in, but one of these days, who knows?
Well, if you get it sorted for September, we've got our next academy in September, and we like to have a bit of music halfway through. So for our presentation, is to get the white label stripes. We'll get you signed up for.
We'll see what we can do, Russell. That sounds good.
Fantastic. So do you play at all now then, or is that just?
I mean, I live in a flat in Edinburgh now, and it's very hard to get a drum kit.
Will the Deveron ever go to 46%?
What's that, Mike?
Sorry, I must be on a delay. I was just touching on Alistair Gray's comment there. She's asking he's asking if the Deveron will ever go to 46.
Never say never with these things, but I think it's thinking about the role that these whiskies play for us. And I think for like Aberfeldy and for the Deveron, I think they're whiskies that we're trying to make as accessible as possible, and for people to get into, I'd say our kind of portfolio as well. And I think people have often asked about Aberfeldy as well, and we do some exceptional casks that are higher, but I think core range at 40%. For those, it's just the sweet spot. I think it's really easy going, I think, at that. And, I get asked that all the time as well, especially for Aberfeldy. But again, doing just tastings of it, with people who are, I think, new to whiskey or even whiskey aficionados, 40%, I think, for those 2 drams, it's just a really nice sort of sweet spot. And kind of out with the core offering, yes, I think you'll find some higher stuff. But I think personally, those 2 both work so well at 40 with that kind of distillery character and the cask finishings that we're doing. Royal Brackler, again, it was down to Stephanie McLeod as malt master and that kind of decision when she was looking at kind of beefing it up with those other sort of sherry casks in there as well. it lent itself more to then going up to that 46%, right? So I think it's, at the end of the day, it's the liquid itself, in part of the way it kind of dictates that, right, as well. So I think we've just lost Mike, if we hopefully.
Yeah, no, his signal's not great, so I think he's maybe just dropped off to try and get a kind of slightly better link. But
yeah, it's a good question. Never say never, right? But I think it's about the role I think each has to play, and I think that's what I love about Aberfeldy. If you speak to people saying, I did a tasting the other day where there was a lot of people who were new to whiskey, and we kind of tasted around the 5 distilleries, and again, for most of the people I'd say who were new whiskey drinkers, Aberfeldy hands down was the one they were like, that was the one they really enjoyed, and it was delicious, and they just found it, I think, really accessible, because of being at that 40%. That said, some of the guys who were massive whiskey fans in the room as well still came back and said Aberfeldy was their favorite, right? Which I think it just shows you it's not always about those kind of bigger ABVs. It's about the taste and what you kind of get in at the end of the day.
You've been in the industry long enough to know it. I mean, but it's one of these things when you go through your kind of whiskey journey, you start off in the 40%, and then you quickly move away to 43, 46, and then you go into cask strength, and oh my God, and you become a bit of a cask strength snob for a wee while until that becomes too much, and then you kind of work your way back down the ABV, and then you start to appreciate the 40s and the 42s and the 43s, whatever, the 43s much more. And I think that's the case. There's a place for all of these whiskies. Tom and Till regularly gets criticised for being 40%, but then the gentle dram is their tag, and that's actually where it absolutely fits in. There's nothing wrong with the flavour, and it is the right thing to do sometimes, because cask strength is fantastic, but 2 or 3, and you're pretty hooped, Whereas you can maybe enjoy an evening with your friends having a few more at 40% and not. So yeah, absolutely.
As you said, it's a journey though, right? And I'll definitely say I was a cask strength snob at one point as well, right? Once you get into it, you think, that's the only way forward, right? Now every cask strength's amazing, and there's a time and place for everything, right? It's horses for courses. It's that kind of. Sometimes I'm like, I do really fancy something pretty big and bold, and sometimes it's just want an easygoing dram, right? And I think Aberfeldy for me is always that easygoing dram. It's that one that you will come back to, as you say, time and time again. Because of just how easygoing it is. It's, we talk about this lovely honeyed richness in every drop, right? That's kind of one of our taglines there. And I think that's it in a nutshell, right? It has that lovely, just, again, honey richness is the word. And if you ever are lucky enough to get a taste of Aberfeldy new make, I was amazed at just the natural sweetness coming into that.
Really?
Just, straight in from the new make, never mind anything else. And it is, honey is definitely the word for it, it's just such a good dram. I say the same goes for the Deveron though, that's when Mike kind of dropped off there. We're still in that conversation, Mike. You've not missed anything as well. We're still going back and forth between Aberfeldy and Deveron. But I think Deveron is that easygoing character, but a slightly different easygoing character. It's not the honeyed richness of Aberfeldy. It's got a little bit of weight to it, I think, as well. I think that's where we say that those kind of horizontal condensers, maybe help a little bit with it. Talking to the distillery manager, says that's where a bit of that kind of weight comes through. If you think about how the vapor is actually flowing through that when it's on its side, right? It's a bit of a different kind of process. So not quite worm tub, but if you think about just the way that interacts with the copper as it comes around, it just gives it a little bit more body to it as well. But yeah, I think it's kind of fruity cereal notes with a bit of weight is the Deveron, and then just this really easygoing honeyed backbone is kind of Aberfeldy. And I think for folks who are new, it's hard to get a better dram than Aberfeldy for me. But I'm sure you guys, what other ones, when folk are new to whiskey, which ones do you guys go for? What do you kind of say?
Anok, Tom and Till, Glen Cadden, 10-year-old as well. There's another one.
You'll notice a theme with all them, all bourbon cask.
Yeah.
And fair play though. I think that's it. As you say, I had pretty much all those drams, and you can definitely, the distillery characters, you say, you really get to understand the distillery, I think, from that initial offering, right? And I think it's the same for us with Aberfeldy 12. There are some sherry casks in there, some first fill, some refill. It's a bit of a combination, but it is quite Exeter bourbon cask heavy, right? And I think you're getting a lot of that distillery character coming through for that reason. So
a lot of kind of the Aberfeldy for me reminds me of kind of that pear drop sweets on the nose. Your lemon and raspberry kind of sweets, really fine. It's so we mentioned Tom and Towel there, who are very open about being chill filtered, being coloured, being 40%. But the Dewars take across the range? Because it's quite, I think it's different for each distillery, isn't it? You don't have a set.
Again, it comes down to the role that they have, I'd say, and just like we were talking about there with Aberfeldy and the Deveron being ones to get folk in. You know, we are, you know, it's not natural color. We are adding a bit of the E150 in there as well. Yeah. And it is chill filtered, because it's below that 46% again for flocculation and things there. But Craigellachie, let's take that as an example. You know, all the other three, so Aultmore, Royal Brackler, and Craigellachie, are 46%, are natural color, and are non-chill filtered. The amount of Instagram messages I get with someone saying, hey, I've just bought a batch of Craigellachie 13 and I've got an old one in the cabinet from last year and the colors are really different. And they're like, is that a problem? What's going on here, right? I get that at least once a week from somewhere in the world, right? With someone kind of coming in. And I think it comes back to, you know, what it's all about and what those whiskies kind of the role is. And for us, you know, Aberfeldy is that one that we'd love to just get all around the world and, you know, to be that introduction whiskey for, you know, for a lot of people, it is that as well, something for the connoisseurs to come back to. So I think, you know, that's why you have to add a caramel colorant there or something to standardize the color in it, right? So it looks the same, it looks uniform, you know, and that of course, you know, it's a big part of why that was introduced was people saying, oh, there's difference in colors here. Is there a problem with that? You know, is it differences in flavor? You know, we buy with our eyes. So personally, I have absolutely no problem with it, right? It plays no role whatsoever in flavor. It's just trying to make it easier to say, oh, they're the same, right? That kind of thing. And I think that's where you get into those bigger whiskies, you know, the ones that we have aimed more at malt enthusiasts. You can start to let that natural color come through, right? Because they understand it. And I think it all comes down to education and kind of understanding. What do you guys think on that as well?
I think as long as people looking back now, I'm wondering if we should we ever have actually pandered to that, because basically we're doing batches, so of course it's different. If somebody says to me, "Oh, that 12-year-old I had 10 years ago is very different to what I had now," well, of course it is, because it's different. It was made at different times. It's not going to be exactly the same. It's almost the same because the master blender is doing their best to match that flavor profile, but it's not going to be 100% the same. You can't expect.
I think to counter that is most whiskey drinkers globally are blend whiskey drinkers, so they don't see batches; they see labels. And I think for me, in the single malt category, as long as people aren't being misled,
Coca-Cola, Johnny Walker,
but that's what they expect.
Yeah,
you get different color day or roux. You know, it's all the same. When people see that on the shelf and they take it home, and it's different to the one they've got, I think there is that suspicion, especially with today's kind of fake market resale kind of thing. But I think personally, on the single malt side of things and colouring, as long as people aren't being misled to perhaps a cask type or an age, you know, deliberately darkening a whiskey to the point where you think sherry bomb and you taste it, it's full bourbon, or that could be misleading. I don't know anyone who, you know, obviously there are some who darken their whiskies, but I think generally the reasoning for it is consistency, isn't it?
I mean,
that education again, is key on that.
I think education is key at the end of the day there. And I think a great example of that is going to be our new Royal Brackler range, where the 12-year-old's finished in Oloroso, the 18-year-old is, I say, in Palo Cortado, and then the 21, you know, a lot of PX kind of influence in there as well. When you see the three bottles sitting side by side, the 18-year-old is by far the lightest, right? It's really light in color by comparison to that 12-year-old. And I think this is going to be a really interesting point for us as people start to get, you know, into this. They'll be like, how come this one's older, but it's way lighter, right? You know, and I think that's that point where you have to have those conversations, and it kind of opens up, you know, great conversations around what we actually mean by cask finishing. And again, the different kinds of sherry that are used there and the different colors associated with that. And, you know, but again, you have to be able to have someone there to talk about it that understanding, right? Because I think otherwise it just gets really confusing. So totally agree to your point there, Mike. You know, that is the reason for it, is to try and make it, I think, easier for the consumer and, you know, look more consistent, if nothing else. But yeah, again, great point there, Russell. You know, it came in, you know, a good few years back now, right, that we kind of started to standardize that. But it is what it is now. But again, I have no problem with that.
No, I think you're absolutely right with the fact that if you can have somebody there to have the conversation, then people understand it much better. And that's not going to happen almost probably 90% or more of the time when people buy a bottle of whiskey. The great example of that is I did a tasting at the end of last year. It was just a private tasting. Mike and I were doing like 4 of these a weekend each during Christmas, during the lockdown. And it was all private parties, work dues, that kind of stuff. And I had a great bunch of guys from Manchester. I think a few of them kind of worked together, but they were all mates. Lovely bunch. Must have been about 16 of them on the screen. Great crack. It was the night was going really, really well. And I was aware the last dram of the night was a Crofton Gia, so I peated the Loch Lomond. And one of the guys just said, "Oh, this has been such a fantastic night. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm so glad there's not been any peated whiskey." And they're all going, "Oh yeah, can't stand." I thought, "Oh fuck, what's happened here with the communication?" Because they'd clearly said, and somewhere along the line it hadn't gone through, and we hadn't picked it up, that they didn't want any peated, and we'd thrown this peated one right at the end, as you not often do in a tasting. So I'm like, "Oh shit." And they were really, I completely, I thought, oh my God, I'm looking at the bottle thinking, do I just wind it up and say, "Guys, just forget the last dram"? And I thought, well, I can't. I said, "Listen, I'm not sure what's happened, but this last dram's peated." And the atmosphere just died. Every single screen, it was like serious. It was like, fuck, okay. I said, like, okay, like let's just pour it. Let's just pour it and let me talk you through the process of what a peated whiskey is. Yeah. So everybody poured it, and almost everybody went, "Oh, that's disgusting. I'm never drinking that." And, so I put it aside. So I said, "Put it aside, guys. Let me just talk about where the peat comes from." So I explained the process, that the distillery spirit's still there. The fruity content from the Loch Lomond's all still there. The maturation, all these flavors that we spoke about earlier on, all your vanillas and that's all still there. The only difference here is that the barley has had some peat smoke through it. So that's what gives you the flavor. So underneath that peat, you'll still get all these flavors. And you can see a couple of people picking up the glass and one or two started to go, "Actually, that's not too bad." And I thought, okay, so there was only one guy after the end of the conversation saying, "No, I just don't get it. I can't do it." But the rest of the room came over. And not only that, they were saying, "Oh, hey, so how much is a bottle of this now?" Whatever it was. I said, "Oh, we've got a couple of bottles left, I think." And I kind of looked at the website. And, "Oh, right, okay." So somebody said, "Oh, I think I'll get one of them." And they went, "Oh, it's sold out." And what happened? And this one wee guy in the top corner screen, who said nothing all night, said, I've bought them. You guys shouldn't have been chatting about it. I've got them." So I literally won the whole room over because you were able to have the conversation.
Yeah.
But had they just bought that bottle on their own, they'd have gone, "Oh, that's disgusting. Put that down the sink," and wouldn't have actually then gone on to it. But at the end of the night, they literally sold us out of that particular whiskey. So it is about being able to have the conversation about chill filtration, about colour, about peat, about all these different things. If you can actually have that conversation with the person about the dram, then go into it and try it.
I mean, that's a great point, and I think it's why conversations like these are so important, right? That's what I love about your Blether, and it's been great to see over. I think one of the great things that's come of COVID and lockdowns is that people are, getting onto these virtual things, way easier. And you're able to talk to people, get distillery managers on, get malt masters on, much easier than ever before. And I think it's being able to have those conversations to a bigger audience as well, right? Where anyone can kind of watch from home.
Definitely. I think for us, it's industry changing in that we could sit down with yourself or a Billy Walker, a Charlie McLean, a Robin Lang, Chris Coates, all these kind of guys, and they're willing to kind of give up an hour because it doesn't involve traveling, it doesn't involve a hotel, it doesn't involve carting around a suitcase full of drams. And things like that. You're in the comfort of your own home. Or
I've literally got my slippers on again, by the way. Here,
yeah.
I mean, how often can you do that, right?
I haven't even got my shoes off. I'm just straight back in from work, and I haven't even got the shoes off yet.
I've at least got trousers on this week. I'm normally sitting there in my shorts.
But it's been so accessible to get, and again, it's we don't take it for granted. Thank you for taking the time out for it.
Absolutely.
And chatting to us as all our guests kind of do. But people can look back at this and ask the questions that they want to ask, but maybe not be able, even for us in Inverurie, when we started the virtual tastings, we opened up to a whole new local audience, which I didn't think the virtual tastings would do. And the guys who are watching regularly will know kind of where I'm going. What we found was that for a tasting, it cost £25 a ticket to come along. Was also maybe a tenner each way in a taxi. It was getting in a babysitter. It was a couple of beers beforehand, a couple of beers after that, and before we know it, it's the guts of £100 on a tasting, and we'd never seen that side of it before until this started happening. So we've kind of gone hybrid on it. So we have tastings in the shop, which we screen live to Zoom, so people can kind of still, because we don't want to lose that virtual audience that we've built up. But without them giving feedback saying this is why we do it virtually, this is why we love the virtual things, we would have probably just gone back to in-house and said that's what we're doing. And again, we can get somebody like yourself to host while we're in the room. We can get you on Zoom, and before, I don't think anyone would have really thought of it.
We just weren't tech savvy in the same way, right? I think
I think if we'd phone you up and say, Matt, do you want to join from your house and go on Zoom and we'll speak to you online? You'd be like, what? What's Zoom? Stop talking riddles, man.
That's it. I think it's time for another dram for me. I'm just looking behind at the shelf. I've not got
another just talking about that. There's a private club I became a member of. I'm going to talk about Craigellachie in a second. I became a private club of a member of a club that were online, based down in England, in Bath, and it was quite an interesting club. They got quite a lot of interesting kind of tastings. They were a wee bit dry, to be honest, but it was interesting to find that out, because I just thought if I was actually down there, I'm not so sure I'd want to be a member of that club. But anyway, the thing that pissed me off was as soon as lockdown in England or whatever kind of ceased, that was it. So I'd been a member of this club for 6 months. I'd signed up to a few tastings. I joined in a few, but now I can't access any unless I go to Bath. And I'm like, oh, that's not particularly fair. You were quite happy to take my kind of money, my money for the tasting stuff, and now you're completely excluding me. So the fact that we were doing this, that was one of the things we felt we owed it to people who didn't stay in Inverurie or close to Inverurie to be able to still have access to our tastings. And we've got regular guys who tune in all the time to the tastings. That it's quite right that actually we provide that, because they supported us all the way through lockdown, so we should still be offering them the chance to be involved.
It'll be interesting to see how it develops as time goes on, right? Because I don't know about you guys, there was a point where things opened up again and you thought, great, I don't have to, you've been sitting on the computer all day for work. And I think that was the point where you've been sitting on calls all day for work, and then it was your entertainment in the evening as well. But I think now that we have freedom again, right, you can go and do other things. I think we're back in a space where this is really comfortable again, right? Where you've got that ability to go and do other things, and you can actually come back to the screen because you want to, not because it's all there is to do, right? That's that. There's kind of this really interesting, we did a lot of lockdown tastings, with the distillery as well, where the absolute peak was, when lockdown was at its height, and then as the freedom opened up, you kind of sort of dip off, but you're seeing it coming back up now again. And I think we're now in a really nice place because it's a proper choice, right? People have the option, and as you say, it's amazing to see how many people really do like joining in and things like this. But I hope it's here to stay, right? And I really think it is in a way. With as you say before, you'd have said to someone, "What's Zoom?" and they'd been like, haven't a clue, right? Whereas everybody knows now. I think it knows how to log in and stuff like that. So
I need to tell you about my favorite tasting I did last year was with a group of people, lovely people. I won't mention names, but they'll know who they are if they're watching. Absolutely fabulous people who live in the same street in Inverurie. And they normally, every Christmas they normally all meet in one another's house for a Christmas party. They all get together, but obviously they couldn't because they weren't allowed to. So they all met online. I hosted their virtual, but they were all in the same street. And I thought, it's amazing. You could all just look at the window and shout at each other. But they were all on screen. It was just like the most beautiful thing ever. I thought, this is fantastic. It was proper siege mentality in that kind of one kind of...
But I think going a little further afield than just everyone on your same street, but it's been whiskey festivals as well, right? Like I've taken part in more whiskey festivals, countries I would never have got out to otherwise. Or I've joined in, just as a punter, wanting to get to other whiskey festivals that I would never have had the time to fly over to and back. And as you say, barriers to entry with costs of getting out to a country, accommodation, staying over, and now you can just listen to, again, malt masters and people from other countries that you would never have got the opportunity to listen to, talking about their craft and their way of making whiskey. So I think we're really in a kind of another golden age, I think, for information. It kind of goes back to what you guys were saying about how important it is for education for people to understand. I think we're in this really interesting kind of new golden era for that, in a way where you are getting access to more people to kind of talk to, and again, Q&A as well, right? I think that's a great thing, that tonight folk can ask questions, in the chat box, and we can kind of answer it. So it's pros and cons, right? I think it's definitely one of the good things coming out of lockdown for sure.
I'm just picking up on Jeremy's question there about the virtual tastings. Do they mean a lot? So I'm not sure if it's directed at Matt or us as a shop, but did the virtual tastings mean a lot more work because they're so easy to organise? For us as a shop, during lockdown, it gave us a lot of work because there was so many of them, a lot of private events.
We'll give Tony a lot of work for sure,
in the sense that packing them, posting them, labeling, all that side of things. What I love about the virtual tasting is when you're finished, the laptop goes down and you're done. But when you're in house, you have the glasses, the dishwashing and cleaning up, getting people out, hoover it, and all that. So on the day, less work. But in the build-up, there's for us. But I don't know if Jeremy's question is, did you find yourself getting out and about more virtually? More markets and things.
If it was aimed at me was it more work, I'd say no, because I had an amazing team at Aberfeldy Distillery doing all the bottling and packaging. So if there's anyone listening to this from there, thank you so much again.
You just take all the glory.
The best job. I just got the glory to be the face on the screen doing the chat. And I literally got a link and signed in and chatted, and, as I say, laptop down. So for me, it's been much, much easier. And again, go back to that Royal Brackler launch, as I say, at the end of 2020 in Taiwan. The fact that me and Stephanie were able to come in live to a dinner, without traveling there. It was a sort of setup where they had a microphone going around the room with a translator, and we were able to see the person talking to us and have a direct conversation with them in a Q&A, right? And there's nothing will ever replace being in that room, but this is pretty close to it, when you can actually still have those one-to-one conversations and kind of one-to-one Q&As without having to travel, for days, essentially, kind of there. So I think you're able to get to more places than I think you ever were before, just because you've got more time as well, right? It's great in a way. But that said, as I say, I had my first global trip as a global brand ambassador, a couple of weeks back now, getting out stateside, and there is still nothing like that, right? You're actually able to share a dram in person, clink of glasses, and be there and take those questions in person. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think is the future. I think it's really questioning.
Do you think it's going to mean when you do actually travel somewhere? I guess as a brand ambassador, I can imagine it's like flight, event, bed, event, flight, and it's just kind of bum bum bum. Do you think the fact that you're actually able to do so many online now, that when you actually do travel somewhere, you're actually going to be able to spend more quality time in that actual place, because you'll have maybe a little bit more time. You're not having to, go to every event. You can maybe do another one from your room and not have to travel there, so you can spend a bit more time physically where you actually are. Do you think that'll work?
I think it'll be up to whoever's managing your schedule. I'll say as a brand ambassador, a lot of the time when you land in countries, you get a bit of a say-so in your schedule, right? But it depends, and they like to pack it for you, and which is great. It's one of those things. When you come back, you're knackered, right? But in a good way, because you've met so many people, you've been to so many events, and I don't know, honestly, is the answer there, Russell, because I think while you're in that country, again, you'll still want to do as much live as you can, right? And I sort of think see them and be at those events. I think it's just all like everything in life. It's all about balance, right? So I think it's just about finding that sweet spot between doing the virtual stuff and doing the stuff in person as well. But
how did you find the restrictions in America? Were they quite open?
I was in Miami which is pretty open as well. You know, there's a couple of things, but it's pretty open in it. So for me, it was almost business as usual while I was out there. You know, obviously we were into the office and stuff, so you were constantly testing just because, you know, that was off our own backs. You know, but again, they're state to state is still quite different out there as well. So yeah, Miami was Miami. Pretty easy going.
We're stopping you. We're stopping you pouring this dram, Matt. So you need to get your dram poured. You were waiting for
I was just pouring it away. In the,
you managed to do it. Sort of just,
that was a ninja pour.
For the dram. So yeah, ninja pour exactly. So
when I was a nurse, I used to work with a guy who could roll a cigarette in his pocket because he never ever shared any.
That's the Scot in me, right? As under the radar, a little pour there. But yeah, home in a glass for me there with Craigellachie 13. I know you guys have both had this one before, once or twice, right?
Yeah, great dram.
Well, the last time we were in the Highlander, so we were up doing a little bit of academy kind of work, and we popped into the Highlander for lunch. And Mike sent me up to the bar to buy the dram, and I think I took the 17 off the bar. Which I wanted Mike to actually guess, but I can't remember the name of the young lad. He works for Tat. But he
I can't remember his name.
To Craigellachie, and I went, "Oh, for yours!" He's like, "Oh."
I was just guessed the age, and I knew it wasn't the 13, so I knew you're too tight to buy the 23, 21.
I mean, if you can get the 23-year-old these days, it's like hen's teeth as well. That's a good one if you can find it. So, as I say, stop. We're not producing more of that at the moment, but never say never. Again, hopefully it'll be one we bring back. But yeah, an absolute gem with the 23-year-old. But I think the 17 and the 13 are quite different from when you get up to the 23 and the 31 and the 33 that we kind of had within the core range. The 13 and the 17 were finishing in a kind of a combination of 50-50 between first fill bourbon, ex-bourbon, first fill, ex-sherry there as well. So I think they've got this real interesting kind of vibrant punch to them, you know, there as well. It's kind of this lovely, big, bold kind of mouthfeel with them as well. Whereas I think when you get up to that 23 and 31, it really mellows out as well. But yeah, if you see me out and about, I can almost guarantee that it'll be a 13 in the glass for me. Or again, very different from the 17. Big fan of the 17, but my go-to, I think, still the 13 there.
Was it a conscious decision to make the, because you've got quite unusual, forgive me if you've answered this kind of when I was dropping in and out, 13, 17, 23, 31, they're not standard ages.
Yeah.
Is that a conscious brand decision, or is that just when the whiskey's at?
It was one of these things. It definitely started. It was just the sweet spot for the liquid, you know, itself. Again, when Stephanie was working with it, you know, 12 was good, but 13 was really good. Do you know what I mean? It was one of those, and it was like 14. It was better at 13. You know, it was one of those kind of just the way it worked, and I think that just fits in with Craigellachie's way of thinking so well. We've always been kind of said to kind of do things our own way, right? We're quite an old-fashioned, quite a stubborn kind of distillery, you know, in many ways. And I think you can bring that right back to our founders, right? You've got two really interesting, kind of very opposing ideas in our two founders, really interesting businessmen, and Peter Mackey, of course, of the kind of Mackey blending dynasty from Glasgow, you know, the sort of White Horse guys there as well. And then you've got Alexander Edward, who, again, for me, is this forgotten whiskey hero. You know, again, Dave Broom and Lindsay Gray a few years back at the Craig Hotel did this great talk about him being this forgotten whiskey hero. And he's one of these guys who you probably never have heard his name because the deed itself was enough. He wasn't like a lot of the other, you know, big blenders who were constantly getting their names out in the newspapers and the press and really wanted to, you know, build a name for themselves. Alexander Edward was this kind of really quiet, really nice guy, you know, by all accounts. All the kind of articles we've managed to find in the archive, anytime he was mentioned in a newspaper, it was for doing a good deed, like, you know, giving money to this trust, you know, giving land to the National Health Service, setting up fighting funds for farmers, giving up his large luxury manor house in Forest as a pop-up military recovery hospital, all these kind of nice things, right? And but yeah, didn't like to be in the limelight, quite a quiet guy. So really kind of yin and yang. But Peter Mackey, I think a lot of Craigellachie's stubbornness, you know, that kind of old school nature seems to come from him. And anyone not familiar with Peter Mackey, again, look him up. There's a great article back in the day on scotchwhiskey.com, talking about him, and it talked about him. He was known amongst his friends as Restless Peter. He just never took a break. He was always these amazing ideas kind of going on. And the famed whiskey writer, Sir Robert Bruce Lockhart, again, one of the best books I think ever written on Scotch whiskey by him. He talked about him being 1/3 genius, 1/3 eccentric, and 1/3 a megalomaniac. He was a bit of a control freak, Peter Mackey. And again, anyone who's seen the movie The Angel's Share, they talk about that malt mill, isn't it? The kind of lost distillery now. And that was one of his, distilleries, I suppose. It was one of his inventions, really. And all off the back of a fallout, wasn't it, on Islay, where he wasn't getting the deals he wanted for what would have been now Lefroy. Mm-hmm. And so he said, right, I'm going to build my own Lefroy. That was basically it. I'll take the water from them because it runs on my land from other distillery. I'll pay their workforce more money to come and work for me, and I'll copy the designs to build my own Lefroy. And, that to me kind of sums up Peter Mackey's character. He was not a man you wanted to get on the wrong side of and kind of mess with, right? A really kind of sure-minded businessman. So you've got this kind of yin and yang, I think, within those kind of two founders. But I think that's kind of Craigellachie in a way in a glass. For me, Craigellachie is a contradiction in a glass, right? You have these really interesting kind of opposing flavors, even in what you're presented with there. And, to me in the nose, you still have those typical Speyside fruity notes in there, right? They're kind of that sort of tropical notes. But then there's this unmistakable Craigellachie note in there, and it's is it umami? What's that? The flavor. It's just that something. It's kind of savory, but it's just hard to place. And our malt master refers to almost like cordite. It's kind of like this wet kind of gunpowder kind of note in there as well. But there's this kind of real meatiness to it as well. And I think that's what you're looking for with the age statements, where she was saying, you've got this kind of big sulfury hit initially from, we allow a lot of that sulfur that comes through the barley, and, and the other processes in the distillery. Being one of those only 19 distilleries with worm tubs today, it allows those to kind of get through. And as you start to age Craigellachie, that kind of big, upfront, meaty, robust, sulfury note starts to dissipate and kind of pave the way for a little bit of that kind of fruitiness to come through until you come into this beautiful kind of balance. And I think 13 years old, it is that just initial sweet spot where it's like, wow, this is something, really special, really unusual. Someone, I can't remember who it was, coined us, and we kind of grabbed hold of it, was they said, oh, you're the bad boy of Speyside, right? And I think there's something quite playful, about that. We're not a normal kind of Speyside distillery, and we've kind of always been that, to be honest. We did a lot of research again with our archivist, and I'm sure you guys are very familiar with Alfred Bernard, of course, his Whiskey Distilleries of the United Kingdom, that lovely big volume of work. And it wasn't in the original volume, it was in a later paper he wrote that was included in later versions of that book. In 1893, we've dated it as, because he said they'd just built the hotel, which had been to that date. And he said, they've just built this distillery, but they've chosen to go with very old-fashioned methods, essentially, right? And remember, this is a guy in 1893 saying, oh, they've gone for pretty old-school ways of making whiskey here, right? So to put that into some context, right, it's not someone today saying that. It's someone back in 1893 saying, this is pretty old school, And he said it was reminiscent of the old Glenlivet style, So again, what most of us would refer to as Speyside, essentially, today. So, we're really the OG of Speyside when you think about it that way, right? We're that kind of old school Speyside style. In my way of thinking with it. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's, again, I'm very biased, right? Home pride there, but there's not another dram quite like it. But again, I'd love to get your thoughts on Craigellachie, because I know you both had a dram or two of it over your travels as well.
Craigellachie's, I've definitely got thoughts about it. I've written a couple of things down, because there's a robustness, there's a wee bit of the fighter in there. We always talk about Ben Nevis as being the barroom brawl of a dram, and I think that's right. I think actually thinking about Ben Nevis and Craigellachie kind of continues that, because if you've got two boxers, you've got this proper scrapper, this Ben Nevis, but then you've got Chris Eubank, that's this Craigellachie. There's that refinedness, and when you said as he gets older, it gets more and more refined and better spoken and more educated. That's exactly what happened with Chris Eubank. So to me, that's it. It sums it up perfectly.
You love a sport analogy there, Russell. I'm making that. I'm making your football one. That's it.
save you the barroom brawl of Ben Nevis and the Chris Eubank of Craigellachie. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think Craigellachie for me is, and you just kind of touched on it with the history there. It's kind of the classic Speyside whiskey before there was a classic Speyside whiskey. A little bit, I think Ben Roma kind of link on to that because they've retained the peat as well. But I think in terms of that, that robust style, I just like the quirkiness of the whole thing, the label and the 13-year-old. The 17-year-old, it kind of draws that difference away from the norm. You kind of off piste kind of thing, and I like it because it's interesting, it's different. But
we just do our own thing, right?
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
I think and again, I think it's that other the Speyside style changed over time. We just thought, nah, we're quite happy. We know what we're doing. You guys do you. We'll keep doing this, right?
Off you pop.
But again, the workforce in Craigellachie, I think this sums up for me is, there's many families that have worked in Craigellachie for generations now. But today we've got a guy there called James Arthur Nichol working in the stills. We call him Young Jim because his dad worked there. He's Old Jim, also James Arthur Nichol. His dad worked there. I think he was Henry Arthur Nichol, but Henry's brother was also James Arthur Nichol, both of who worked in the stills. And then their father again was another James Arthur Nichol. So there's been 4 generations of father and son and 4 generations of James Arthur Nichol working there since 1918. So not that long after the distillery was built. And
how old is Young?
What's that?
How old is
Young James?
Young Jim now. I don't want to be unkind to him here as well. What hazard a guess? Probably 40s, I'll say.
Oh, okay, that's young. That's young.
That's not bad, right? But Old Jim.
I thought you were going to say he's like retired and he's 75. And
no.
He's still calling Young Jim.
Still working. I say, unfortunately, Young Jim's got 2 daughters now. Neither of them are called Jim, so I will say it's ruined the rest of the story there. So.
You could get Jamie. Jamie can be a girl's name.
That's it. Yeah, no Jamie's there, unfortunately. But they're just one of these families, in Craigellachie. So Old Jim still lives in one of the houses just next door, pretty much the old distillery manager's house next door to the distillery. Yeah. And like the house he moved from was literally the house on the other side of the road. Literally, that was the big move, like across the road. That's where Young Jim now was born, right? So
emigrated.
Emigrating
across the road.
It's that to me just sums Craigellachie up right there. And again, the Nichol family is only one example of several families that have worked through the distilleries now. But
it's quite a similar story to what's going on with Glenfarclas at the moment as well, isn't it? They had the John Grant, then George, and then George, and then John, and now 2 daughters, and none of them are called John or George. and none of them are interested in whiskey. It's like, who's going to take it up? What's going to happen?
That's it, right? Who's next to take up the mantle? So
there's a lot in a name.
Yeah.
Happily changed my name to John Grant by Deepole and get myself up there.
I'm your long lost unfound.
But it is, and I know, Russell, we were saying this just before as well at the start of the call. It's one of these distilleries that just so many people drive past, right? And they never get round. So to say, definitely one, if you can get round, great. But we'll never turn it into a big tourist distillery. And again, that becomes clear as soon as you get inside. With the expansions over the years as well, everything's quite higgledy-piggledy, right? There's no lovely flowing order like you get at Aberfeldy. If it was the first distillery you went round, you'd be thinking, is this how they all make whiskey? This is mental. It's nothing's quite in order. And again, that lovely pagoda, for example, you see now where the old maltings was. That's now where our lovely big Steinicke ash tun is now sitting inside under that. Because it's the only room big enough, to put that big Steinicke in when we put it in the early 2000s. So.
One question I did want to ask is about the cows across the road from the distillery, just up a wee bit. So one thing we love to do on a tour is go up to Cardew and feed the cows. So do you know if the cows across the road are as partial to a digestive biscuit?
Oh, I think those are Ronnie's cows. So good Highland cows there as well. I think they're fairly tame beasts, but again, I wouldn't want to say go up and give them a digestive, as I say, in case things go wrong. So at your own discretion, but they are, I think, fairly docile beasts. But yeah, nice Highland cows on the way past for sure. But digestives, is that the secret? Is it?
That's
there we go.
Secret.
Well, for Cardew, all you've got to do is take the pack out and wave it, and they'll come away from the silage and come and.
But they know the cheap stuff as well. They won't go for a blue bag. It's got to be
Don't
red.
bother us with your bloody Copy biscuits, boy. Get your fucking McVitie's up here like this.
Oh well, I told you every day's a school day, right? In whiskey, but that's a new one for me. Then digestive biscuits. I know the secrets now.
The only thing about the Cardew cows, so there's a bull and 2 cows, and the bull's beautiful. He's big, black kind of hair, absolutely bulging eyes. He's just a fabulous beast. But he's known to just wag his head from side to side. And of course, his horns are very massive. And by the time we take people there, we've usually filled them full of 2 or 3 drams. So you've always got to say to people, just watch the horns. Don't get too close because he'll turn and that'll be it. Sayonara. So, yeah.
And they're beautiful animals, though, eh?
They are.
Oh, fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. We're talking about Cardew, and you're talking about, being in the place and being persuaded to kind of be involved in a spirit that you might not ordinarily drink. I mean, I've nothing against Johnny Walker at all. I've just never ever drunk any. But my only reason for ever buying my very first bottle of Johnny Walker was continually going up. Well, I'm going up there on Saturday, continually going to Cardew with guests, and not always doing the tour or not always doing the tasting with people, because I'll just sit back and maybe sit in the shop, speak to the staff, maybe go outside. But the last time I went, I picked up my one and only and very first bottle of Johnny Walker, the Green Label. And it's lovely. But ordinarily, I probably wouldn't have bothered buying a bottle. But it's just actually being in a place and getting involved. And I'd probably do it again. I'd probably buy another. It's okay. Mm-hmm. Not bad at all. But it's that thing about actually, as you say, being involved in a place and doing the tour can make you
just gives you a new appreciation for it, right?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
We're so lucky that the craftsmen and women that we work with are so passionate about what they do and have such skill. You can't help but be drawn in. You want to learn more and you want to have a taste of it. So, for sure. I think it's there's no bad whiskey in Scotland, right? Just some that I prefer more than others. I'd say that's
exactly. Yeah. The one you prefer is always open and in your hand as well.
That's it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I love the I love the Johnny Walker story. Going back, we do quite a big piece on Johnny Walker when we talk about the Whiskey Ambassador course, which I've just come off. But I love the fact that there was all these guys, the John Dewars, the Matthew Glogues, the Johnny Walkers, who saw whiskey as a great commercial project and kind of went out, branded it globally, and was selling to, before brands were in marketing and advertising were a thing, they were selling it to ship captains and saying, just pay me for what you don't bring back, kind of thing.
I mean, that's it, right? Scotch whiskey would not be where it is today at all if it hadn't been for these, really entrepreneurial blenders at the end of the day. Because
Dewars had the first marketing campaign, didn't they? The first video market.
Video again for marketing for anything. Yeah. So again, it was the whiskey of our forefathers. His forefathers was like this campaign. It's the longest running Dewars campaign, and it's believed to be the first, motion picture, moving picture advert for a product of any kind, right, in the world. So it was this big thing at the end of the 1890s as well. And again, it was this. I always say it's like if you've seen Game of Thrones, right? Have you guys seen Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
If I say like the Red Wedding, the Red Wedding, right? Everyone's like, oh, of course. It's like this scene in pop culture that everybody remembers. Well, this was a scene in that Gilbert and Sullivan operetta called, I think it was The Witch's Curse. And it was this really famous scene where the ancestors came to life out of paintings and came to talk and kind of warned the lead character. So Tommy Dewar, being the genius that he was, thought, well, let's not make it just any old, ancestors. Let's make it the Dewars ancestors. And they're not coming out for a conversation. They're coming out to share a dram, out the walls. So it started as, a black and white kind of print ad. Then it moved to color. Then it moved to like automatons where it was like moving posters. You'd push a button in the mechanics and it would kind of move the poster. So they'd come out to life, and then went one further and again, put it into a motion picture. And not only motion picture, and it wasn't in a cinema, he projected it onto one of the biggest, tallest buildings in New York at the time. So again, there was reports in the newspaper of the coming to a standstill because everyone who was driving past in their cars stopped, and everyone on the street stopped to look at this, giant kind of advertisement of these. Again, it was kilted Scotsmen, dancing about kind of on screen, coming to life out the pictures to share a dram of Dewars. But that just sums up, the Tommy is a guerrilla marketeer. He was this really interesting guy who just looked at advertising differently, kind of getting the message out around the world. He took, I think it was the first year's profits of the company to travel, around the world, and he, stopped in it. I think was it something like 54 countries, a huge number of countries, traveling the world, and kind of appointing sales agents. So think of him as the first kind of global brand ambassador, in a way, that taking his time out from being at the distillery to spread the word of kind of whiskey around the world. But I think one of my favorite ideas that he ever came up with was when he was down in London. He realized they have a lot of dirt roads, and he said, this is wasted advertising space. So he created a special bicycle wheel or cart wheel. Again, you could put it onto a cart as well. That had an impress saying John Dewars Sons Fine Perthshire Whisky perfectly around the wheel. So as these wheels went through the streets on bikes or in carts, it printed onto the ground John Dewars Sons Fine Perthshire Whisky. So literally getting the word all over town, right? What an amazing mind to think of these at the time. So
we're honestly, gonna have to do that on the whiskey bus. We'll get white paint, and wherever we drive, Inverary the whiskey shop's going to be there.
Definitely have to do it in Isla as well.
Yeah. Just way ahead of his time, right? We'd think of him as a kind of guerrilla marketeer by today's standards, but
that is incredible. Yeah. Nobody's done anything like that since. I'm thinking about cycling Tour de France when people paint names across the roads and stuff like that. But there's nothing. That is genius.
Yeah. Again, it was just looking at his environment and thinking we can do something with that. I think my other favorite one he did was it was Dewars Wharf, and they had the largest mechanical light up sign in Europe, which used, I think it was like 1,400 old-fashioned light bulbs, like massive bulbs going up the side of this. And it was a giant drinking kilted Scotsman, and the mechanical arm brought the whiskey up to his mouth, and it looked like his kilt was blowing in the wind with the way the lights flashed. And it was one of these where it was deliberately positioned where it was in front of the Prime Minister at the time. He could see it from his Prime Ministerial office window. And of course, it was Lloyd George, who was a notorious teetotaler and having a lot of problems, with the Scotch whisky industry of its time. So I like to think that was a bit of a, two fingers to you kind of thing, Lloyd George having to look at this out his office window, this giant drinking kilted Scotsman. So a good sense of humour, I think, in a way there as well. But
it's like
honestly, we would not be where we are today without these sort of guys, right?
Yeah. Our local distillery at Glengarry is just next to the what used to be the rehab clinic. So you can imagine the same kind of thing. All these guys coming out, and the first thing they smell is this whack of distilled spirit or draft or something in their face. Yeah.
But it's interesting. You're also a historian, and I love history as well. Today picked up a lovely Mary Queen of Scots book for £2 at the charity bookshop, and I managed to find a Dave Broom book and an old Charlie MacLean book, so £6.50 spent in 3 fantastic books. But we were talking about, there was somebody, who was it we were talking to? Oh, it was Robin. It was Robin last week, Robin Lang, just talking about the demise of these fantastic historical. So it's not that long ago, but it is a wee while ago since the actual founders of these distilleries, and then you've got your brand ambassadors, and then your characters like your Jimmy Cunes and all these kind of people come along. Like yourself, Matt, you're the new generation. What responsibility, I guess, do you feel to kind of bring that on? I love the fact that you've got the history. There, it's on the tip of your tongue. It's fantastic. I've loved listening to what you're saying tonight. But what sort of responsibility do you feel to kind of continue that?
A huge amount of responsibility, right? And as I say, they are old distilleries, but relatively new brands. And in particular, I think for the distilleries that I look after, most of them, their story has never been told yet, right? It's not one where it's been this single malt that's been known as a single malt for a long time. So I feel a huge amount of responsibility with that, because it's not just continuing the story for a lot of people, it's helping forge this story and get it out what the story of the distillery is, right? So I'm incredibly lucky that the archive team that we have, headed up by Jackie Sargent, is phenomenal. You know, Jackie Sargent is our head of global archives. She used to look after, you know, whiskey in general. Now we have Samantha Chase as well, who is our single malts, you know, dedicated ambassador now. And, you know, that's the sort of level we have. We have someone in the team who's dedicated. Their entire job is just looking into the history of our malt distilleries, right? That is literally their job day to day. And one person I still don't think is enough, right? Because it's amazing the amount of information out there. And, you know, in old books. I'm a huge fan of a charity shop as well, as you're saying, Russell. I mean, my spare time, I'm not a big bottle collector, like deliberately. I don't have, you know, I don't go out and buy bottles. My collection's not bad, just from if you work in whiskey for a few years, right? And you've got mates working at different distilleries and you're doing swaps with them all. Your collection gets pretty big without really meaning to be. But books is what I love. You know, I spend a lot of time going out to find old whiskey books as well. And I think that's, you know, a big part of the responsibility as an ambassador is trying to be as well read as you can. And don't get me wrong, by no means, if you think you know everything, you're wrong, right? Every day is a school day, and I think things are constantly uncovered as well that we thought we knew, right? And then you actually, there's this interesting kind of point in history, right? I think a lot of the work that Dave Broom was doing as well with Arthur Motley and their kind of videos as well was extremely interesting as well. So, you know, you constantly have to keep kind of on top of all that. As well. So every day is a school day. You know, that's what I always say in Scotch whiskey. And if it's not, you're doing it wrong. You know, you're speaking to guys who've been in the industry 40, 50 years, and they're still saying they're learning something new every day.
I love as well in whiskey, and I think we touched on it with Chris Coates as well, is the evolution of facts. Some things that you think are true, and then you find out that
that's a great term.
Yeah. I remember, there's a few good ones there. And again, there's usually truth in it, but things change. And I think one of the examples of that, and I remember this was one I remember listening to Chris Coates, was the highest distillery in Scotland, right? Most people would say Dalwhinnie. It is Braeval, right? I remember when I worked for Chivas, it's Braeval. There's 2 meters in it. And again, does it really matter? Probably not. It doesn't, you know.
It does for the marketing team.
Whiskey quiz, right? What does it actually mean, right? And it's I'll hold my hand up to this for one of ours as well, where with Macduff, I remember at one point we said the most northeasterly distillery, right? So what does that actually mean? And then Gary, being his nerdy self, Gary the Grain Man Ross, as we call him, he said, well, actually, if you think of north and east as 2 different varying points, you're using that as your kind of 2 points. Actually, you're going to have Old Pulteney would be more technically northeast. It's a lot more north than we are east. So, you know, if you're being specific, actually, that's probably right. And, you know, I think we were never trying to make a claim to say we are the most northeasterly distillery. It was more about trying to give the sense of place. And I think that probably still applies to Dalwhinnie, right? You're thinking it's out on the road. It's this really high point in Scotland, you know. So I think it's all about the question of why is that important, you know, really. As well. But again, it seems most of us, the further back you go in the history of Scotch whiskey, we're too busy drinking and enjoying it to write much down at the time, right? And I think the more you read one book on Scotch whiskey and you think, oh, I've got this sussed, I understand the history of whiskey. And then you pick up another book and you go, wait a minute, those dates there's a year difference there. And suddenly it just starts to move a little bit, right? So I think
there are some things that are set in stone, like the name of a place. And when we were talking to Christopher Coates, he said something about one of his friends said about being close to a place called Forg, and of course, in this tasting live on Zoom or whatever, Chris had said Forg, and this guy had ridiculed him and said it's not called Forg, it's called Foggy. And I'm like, wait a minute. So that's what happened to Chris on this live taste, and he had to kind of fumble his way through and kind of, Rachel Barry says it's called Forg and blah, 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 but felt, well, gosh, this guy obviously knows what he's talking about. But I think Foggy is actually Foggy Low. That's what I say. That's Aberfeldy.
Yeah,
that's Foggy.
That's it, right.
Forg is called Forg. So, of course, I went out for a walk and I took loads of pictures of the Foggy Nuke, the new inn, Foggy Loan, Bremner's, the furniture place, Foggy. And I sent him all these pictures, and he said, "You have no idea how vindicated I feel." I said, "Go get him." You need to go.
If you haven't heard from Christopher in the last if you haven't heard from Christopher the last 2 weeks, it's because he's hunting down that guy.
He's hunting down the guy. It's not
called
Foggy, it's called Forg.
We don't make it easy with our names, right? It's Scotland. I still think is it Findocti up in the northeast? I still think it's like Finecti and stuff on the side.
Finecti, yeah.
Right, yeah.
There's Findocti as well.
You can say Findocti if you're posh.
Aye, that's it.
The laird of Findocti. That's the. No, it's
I still remember
we had a great one. So I'm drinking the concept, the Dal Ewan, and I was on with the it was Douglas Lang, where we're doing a tasting with him. We had this Dal Ewan release, and there was a guy, Stuart Fraser, I think, was doing the brand ambassador working, and having a great laugh and all that. And so we Dal Ewan, and the guy is it's actually pronounced Dalwanye. And we were like, sorry? He's like, yeah. My daughter's taking Gaelic at school, so it means I think the green field, corner of the green field, or green grass, or I can't remember exactly, but he goes, yeah, it's pronounced Dalwanye.
Green grass to do Dal Ewan.
So me and Stuart were like, this guy obviously knows what he's talking about. So the rest of the tasting, we're trying to. You felt like the was it Italian cheese Galban? And it was like Dalwanye, and we're like, I really don't think this is right, but it turns out, Dal Ewan is. But apparently the fishermen, there's an area, but they call it Dullen, just along the river. It's pronounced Dullen if you're a fisherman. Whether that's
it, right? I think it comes back to
happy with Dullen
things coming from Gaelic, right? And I think it's a lot of the words that we have now are kind of bastardized Gaelic, right? And again, we've made our own. It's been anglicized over the years, so I always take things with a pinch of salt when it comes to names and stuff, right? I think whatever the locals are saying, that's what I'll try and say, right? As well. One of my favorite examples of that was someone saying, "Oh, I thought it was a French brand, Craigellachie," which was my favorite way I've ever heard Craigellachie pronounced as well. I thought it was a French brand, Craigellachie, which it just gives us so much humor as well. When we're talking in marketing meetings, we still talk about Craigellachie.
It's a French scrum half.
That's brilliant.
So there you go, the Craigellachie. But it's just you've just got to laugh, haven't you? I think that's it. It's fair play to anybody trying to pronounce our Scottish names. We don't make it easy for anyone, right?
You think somebody coming at the country for the first time, walking into a whiskey shop or whatever, looking along, it's unreal. The Findocti was a misspelling by the train company. I love who was it? We had on Scott Adamson from Atton had the they had the world's only Higland distillery because they missed out the H in Highland or something, and it'd been on the van driving around for years without the H. the world's only Higland whiskey distillery.
These are the stories I love, though, right? It's
they're the best ones.
This is what makes it.
Super.
Oh God, absolutely.
I suppose we could go on all night, guys, but we'd better call. We want people to keep coming back.
Yes.
And
we've yet to manage a 3 hour. We could easily manage a 3 hour tasting. 2.5, I think, is the.
So Matt, thank you very much. Hopefully we can get you up to the shop sometime and do.
Definitely. And I'm sure by the signs of it, I'm due you a few samples of some nice things as well. So I'll make it happen. I definitely need to head up that way sometime soon. So I'll be sure to pop in and say hello. But honestly, it's been a pleasure joining you guys. I'm a big fan of the Blether.
We forgot to say stick on when we go off live just for a quick a 2-second debrief. But don't disappear. But thanks very much on behalf of everybody watching. I think that tonight's chat has been incredible. Your knowledge of Speyside, of stories, of everything is just phenomenal. I love the fact that you know the guy that lives across the street that knows who works in that still house.
That's it, right? I still can't believe this counts as a job, getting to talk about home. And, Mum growing up always says I could blether for Scotland, and here I am, literally blethering for Scotland. So it's paid off. So literally on the blether.
Perfect, absolutely perfect.
Well, thanks very much, and thank you everyone watching. Next week we have a wee break. We're fully immersed in the Highland Whisky Academy, so we won't be having a blether. next week. But the week after, we are
we've got the Uncharted.
Whiskey Tea. Is it Uncharted? Jack and Dana.
Uncharted. Yeah. So your rumors and your where's he gone? Mike didn't like that. So yes, we do have we've got John and Dana. No, John and Dana. 2 seconds. Till I quickly. It is Jack and Dana from Uncharted Whisky, independent bottlers. Some fantastic stuff. Strawberry Fields, Rumors. Anybody's had a bottle before. Wonderful independent bottle whiskies. So they will be with us in 2 weeks' time. And Mike, are you there? He's not. So yeah, no worries. So yeah, good night, guys. We'll head off and we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.
Great. Thanks again, guys.
Yeah, cool.
See you later.